Sergio is in big danger of losing his seat with Daniel, his likely replacement, Red Bull on the back foot as McLaren start the weekend strong, and Hamilton makes shocking admission about his pace. Do consider subscribing to the channel. Let's get straight into the latest F1 news. The door for a sensational mid-season switch of drivers at Red Bull hasn't been completely shut, despite the renewal of Sergio Perez's contract. Perez was recently confirmed on a new 2-year deal at Red Bull, which seemed to have secured his immediate future. But concerns over his performances in light of a tightening championship battle could yet trigger further changes on the driver front. With Red Bull consultant Helmut Marko recently reiterating the stance that the VCARB squad's purpose is primarily to serve as a junior team for Red Bull, he revealed the goal had been for Daniel Ricciardo to be considered for a seat with Red Bull if he produced exceptional performances. But the team then announced a contract renewal with Sergio Perez, surprisingly early in the season, with Christian Horner telling Sky F1 ahead of the British Grand Prix that the team were hopeful of seeing the Mexican's form return to what he showed in the first 5 races in 2024. Since finishing 4th in Miami, Perez has finished 8th twice, 7th once, and retired twice. While Max Verstappen continues to rack up the points, Red Bull's lead in the Constructors' Championship is just 64 points as Silverstone marks the halfway point of the championship. Asked whether Red Bull had made an error in signing Perez up again so early, Horner replied, "That's a brutally hard question. But of course, the point that you sign a driver, the contents of any agreement are not going to be disclosed to all of you lot." So it made absolute sense to sign Checo Perez at that point in time. But this is a business in which there are pressures to deliver. He revealed Red Bull's thinking had been a contract renewal would give Perez the confidence to keep his strong start to 2024 going. "We thought the contract would help," he said. "I think it's something that Checo is working very hard on, and he knows this is a sport where there's no hiding. Particularly with Max Verstappen as your teammate. He knows he's being measured against the very best, and we need him up there supporting Max, because there's 2 McLarens now. There's 2 Ferraris, there's 2 Mercedes, and we need there to be desperately 2 Red Bulls." Rumors emerged in German publication Auto, Motor and Sport on Friday that the possibility of a Ricciardo-Perez swap has been revisited recently, with PlanetF1.com understanding from its own inquiries that performance clauses on both sides exist to allow for changes to be made if desired. Sources close to the situation have indicated to PlanetF1.com that Christian Horner is pleased with Ricciardo's recent upswing in form, having scored points in 2 of his last 3 races, the Australian no longer being outclassed by Yuki Tsunoda, who is already confirmed with VCARB for next season. The aforementioned performance clauses on both Ricciardo and Perez's contracts could open the door for a change of seats, particularly if Ricciardo can continue his upward momentum through the Silverstone, Hungaroring, and Spa-Francorchamps races to reach the summer break on a high, putting Horner in the luxurious position of being able to choose whether or not to promote Ricciardo back to the seat he vacated at the end of 2018, or stick it out with Perez. Speaking to Amos, Marko didn't shut down the scenario facing Horner and Red Bull as he said, "We'll know more by the summer break." Daniel Ricciardo promotion could be a bomb on the F1 2025 driver market. If Ricciardo and Perez's respective forms do indeed trigger a mid-season seat switch, clauses in Perez's contract would likely then make him a free agent on the driver market for F1 2025. Perhaps a tempting proposition for one of several midfield teams still without a full lineup. These include Williams, Audi, Alpine, and Haas. A Perez departure from the Red Bull camp would also leave a vacancy at the VCARB squad alongside Tsunoda, with the most obvious candidate for such a scenario being the patient Liam Lawson, as the Kiwi plies his trade as reserve for both Red Bull teams. However, another contender could be Isaac Hadjar. He carried out FP1 duties for Red Bull on Friday at Silverstone as part of the team's junior driver's obligations for the season and impressed Marko following the run. The Austrian also indicated discussions on Hadjar's future will be made during or after the summer break, as he spoke to media following Friday's track action. Ricciardo's promotion back to Red Bull, should it occur, also is no guarantee of him continuing in the seat in F1 2025, leaving the possibility of further changes being made for next season. Lando Norris believes the British Grand Prix is going to be tight, but he's not expecting his competition to come from Max Verstappen and Red Bull. Instead, it's coming from Mercedes. After 2 practice sessions for the British Grand Prix, the McLaren driver feels his biggest challenge on race day will come from the Mercedes team of George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. Despite the fact that Lando Norris topped the timing charts in both FP1 and FP2, he's not quite confident that pace will remain all the way through race day. Speaking to Sky Sports on Friday afternoon, he admitted that he didn't feel that comfortable this morning. But through the sessions, we made some tweaks and I got in a much nicer window, which is important around here because it's quite on the nose and quite sketchy. But that progress and that performance aren't enough for Norris to feel comfortable calling McLaren the cream of the British GP crop. I think we're pretty tight, and even with probably Mercedes, Norris said, they seem probably just as quick as us. They just didn't turn up the engine and do as much in the final runs. I think we're in a good place, but we definitely have a little more to find. In FP1, Norris topped the timing charts ahead of Lance Stroll's Aston Martin and his teammates McLaren. Max Verstappen ended the session in 4th place, with Mercedes' George Russell 5th. In FP2, Norris claimed the lead of the session ahead of his teammate and Sergio Perez. Mercedes claimed 6th Lewis Hamilton and 10th Russell in the session. However, McLaren prioritized soft tire runs during practice, while other teams explored the medium compound for longer periods of time. The softer tires likely resulted in a comfortable lead at the head of the field for the Woking outfit. And as all Formula One fans know, practice is only the beginning. True pace will begin to reveal itself in qualifying, while race day itself can be an entirely different beast. There's quite a lot to play for this weekend, as Norris and Verstappen continue to come down from their contact in the final stages of the Austrian Grand Prix, which resulted in Mercedes' George Russell sneaking through for a win. Lewis Hamilton has admitted Mercedes have got some work to do at the British Grand Prix after the 7-time world champion said he was just slow over team radio in FP2. Mercedes claimed their first F1 victory since November 2022 at last weekend's Austrian Grand Prix, where Hamilton's teammate George Russell capitalized on a dramatic collision between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris. Russell's win came after Mercedes' form had improved considerably over recent weeks, with Russell and Hamilton finishing 3rd in Canada and Spain respectively last month. Russell also set pole position in Montreal behind the wheel of the much-improved W15 car. Mercedes once again showed flashes of pace in practice at Silverstone, where both cars were a fixture in the top 10 across FP1 and FP2. However, Hamilton caught the attention towards the end of the second session when he commented over team radio. "The track is fine, I'm just slow." Norris, who set the pace in both sessions, highlighted Mercedes as potentially the biggest threat to McLaren this weekend, claiming Hamilton and Russell seem probably just as quick as us, despite not showing their true pace in FP2. Yet Hamilton, whose fastest lap in the afternoon session was 0.653 seconds slower than Norris's, is convinced that Mercedes are just not as fast as the likes of McLaren at this stage of proceedings. He said, "It felt fine. It generally felt good, just not as fast as the guys ahead like the McLarens. We don't have upgrades this weekend. We have some small tweaks to things, but not necessarily upgrades. But every time we add something to the car, we are going in the right direction, but the others are bringing upgrades at the same time. We were 6.5 tenths off in that one. I don't know if it's truly exactly 6 tenths, but we've got some work to do." Russell agreed with Hamilton's assessment, suggesting that McLaren and the Red Bull of Max Verstappen are currently a step ahead of Mercedes, whose battle appears to be with Ferrari as things stand. He said, "FP1 was a strong session with the car feeling great. FP2 was a slightly more challenging hour, and we need to pick through why that was. It was much windier, and I don't think we got the tires in the right window, so that could explain a chunk of it. The conditions are likely to change across the weekend, with more rain possible too, so we will have to be adaptive. I hope the fans didn't get too wet this afternoon. As always, it was fantastic to see their support in the grandstands. After today's running, I'd say that the competitive picture looks similar to the past few races. McLaren and Max look a step ahead, and it's close between ourselves and Ferrari. We will work hard overnight to try and take a step forward and see where that leaves us tomorrow." Helmut Marko has admitted Red Bull are losing too much in the slow corners at Silverstone, with the RB20 not at the level of McLaren driver Lando Norris in British Grand Prix practice. Norris topped both practice sessions on the opening day of action at Silverstone, leading a McLaren 1-2 with a 0.331 second advantage over teammate Oscar Piastri in FP2. Although Sergio Perez was classified third in the second session, having set his quickest lap slightly later than his competitors, Red Bull endured a difficult day as Max Verstappen could only manage 4th and 7th in FP1 and FP2 respectively. Verstappen had to abort one of his flying laps in FP2 after a snap saw him briefly run off the track at the high-speed Beckett's-Chapel section of the Silverstone course. Speaking to Austrian outlet ORF after FP2, Marco admitted Norris are behind Norris as things stand after a difficult session for several reasons. And he pointed to the slow speed turns of the first sector as a clear area of weakness for the RB20, with Red Bull losing 0.3s to Norris in that section alone. He said, "We lose too much in the slow curves, especially in Sector 1, where we lose almost 3/10. Fuel and tire corrected. We are worse than in the first practice." The long run was also not so confident. Still good, but also not at the level of Norris, so we still have to correct a few things here. Marco added that Red Bull now face a challenge to find a right balance between retaining their performance in the first corners while working out ways to bring the car up to standard in the slow sections. He said, "It will now become clear whether we find a right balance that we maintain our performance in the fast curves without losing so much in the slow ones." Red Bull's high-speed performance was a noticeable strength at last weekend's Austrian Grand Prix, where Mercedes driver Lewis Hamilton told media, including PlanetF1.com, that Verstappen held an insane advantage, thought to be in the region of 12 to 13 kph over the opposition. Thanks for watching the video. Comment below who you think will win tomorrow's race.